From Washington, D.C., welcome to the 132nd weekly podcast of the Harness Racing Alumni Show. I'm Freddie Hudson, and I'm here today with Trade Martin and Bob Marks.
The Harness Racing Alumni Show with your hosts, Freddie Hudson and Trade Martin.
This week's Alumni Show is brought to you by Bill Houghton, insuring Standardbreds and farms for over 40 years. Bill knows the ins and outs of equine insurance. Make sure your equine investments are protected. Call or text Bill at 954-655-5547. That's 954-655-5547. Call Bill now.
Hey, Freddie, I heard that Huntington Farms had a great sale. Why don't you tell everybody about it?
Huntington Farms Steve and Cindy Stewart wish to thank all of the owners and trainers that purchased a Huntington Farm yearling at this year's Lexington Selected Sale. Huntington Farm wishes all of you much luck and success with your purchase. Look for the Huntington Farm consignment at the upcoming Harrisburg sale, November 8th through the 12th. For more information, call Huntington Farm at 859-987-3983 or email huntingtonfarm@cs.com. That's huntingtonfarm@cs.com. Joining us today is returning guest, Standardbred owner and breeder, Andy Cohen.
It's good to be here.
Andy,
thanks for inviting me, guys.
Andy, welcome back to the Harness Racing Alumni Show. Andy, last week you attended two meetings, one with USADA's CEO, Travis Tygart, and their Equine Director, Dr. Tessa Muir, and the other meeting with HISA's Chairman of the Board, Charlie Scheeler, Board Member Joe DeFrancis, and their Executive Director, Hank Zeitlin. Can you give us some of the details of those meetings?
Well, I think that I can try to give some details. I don't know how many details there are. I found both meetings to be encouraging. Encouraging for anyone in the standardbred industry who sees the new federal legislation as a way to make the sport cleaner and safer and better and more likely to survive the challenges ahead. I was particularly encouraged by the second meeting we attended via video conference with the folks who are intimately involved in running that new federal authority. I think that they acknowledge, as they have to, that there is a difference in the standardbred breed compared to the thoroughbred breed, and they seem open anyway to the possibility that those differences are going to be considered when we get to the point, at some point here in the next 6 months or 9 months of 3 months, of evaluating different medication rules and timing and stuff like that. So that was encouraging to me.
Yeah, they sounded like they wanted to work with us 100%. That was my output. They sounded open to the idea that there is a difference, that our horses don't have the catastrophic breakdowns that thoroughbreds have, that our horses race more often, that our horses are not galloping, right? That our horses are restrained in some ways by the trot and the pace, and that's all good. You want, if you're going into a new endeavor, you want to know or to believe that the folks who are going to be in charge understand where you're coming from and are open to listening to your arguments for why you should be treated one way or another. Now, having said that, I don't think we're going to see sweeping differences in the rules. I think that there are, safeguards in place to make sure that doesn't happen, but I don't necessarily think there need to be sweeping differences in the rules between thoroughbreds and standardbreds for the most part. Even now, as John Campbell keeps saying, the rules are generally the same, for horses of both breeds. The first meeting was with Travis Tygart. That was, to me, again, a reflection of the fact that, we're going to be dealing with a reasonable cop. Travis Tygart is the cop in all of this, right? USADA is going to be enforcing this new federal law. It's going to be USADA people who are investigating allegations of race fixing and doping and stuff like that. So we're never going to be in a situation, no one is, of being best friends with Travis Tygart and Tessa Muir, who's the sort of the equine specialist.
you're never good friends with the police chief and the prosecutor. But when you talk to these folks over and over again, Travis and Dr. Muir, you get the sense that they too understand that there are differences in the breed, that they are going to be open to trying to aggressively root out the cheaters that we know in our sport. And that's certainly more than we're getting now from the folks who are in charge of that on the state racing commission level.
Yeah, correct. And Travis pointed out, he said there might be less testing and more investigation work, which I think is a smart way of going.
Right, and he's consistently said that. One of the myths that the USTA has tried to perpetuate through this process is that there's necessarily going to be these onerous new charges to industry participants to pay for the enforcement, the federal enforcement that's going to come. And there may be additional costs, but there also are going to be additional savings. Travis Tygart has said that over and over again, that this notion that the way we're doing it now, which is testing, in every race and so forth, it isn't necessarily the smartest way to do it or the most efficient, cost-efficient way to do it, that there are better ways to do it, that there are more aggressive and creative ways to find cheaters. And if that's the case, and I think it is, then you're going to see differences in the way testing performs, and there are going to be savings that are going to offset the additional costs. So, I think that's one area where we will know when we know what the costs are, but the idea that, A, they're going to necessarily be enormously more than what we're paying now, and B, that harness racing somehow is going to pay for thoroughbred racing, I think those are no longer sustainable. Those allegations or those charges or those sort of theories that some folks have been perpetuating just simply don't hold water based on what we're hearing from these officials.
Correct. And what's your take on the HISA meeting that they had with the USTA in late August, and the USTA not giving any updates or any information regarding the meeting to its members?
Well, that to me is a disgrace. It's a disgrace that we didn't even know the meeting took place until a week later. It's a disgrace that the folks who are empowered to act on behalf of the membership are unable or unwilling to discuss such important matters with the membership. I don't know if the folks who met with HISA have shared everything that they learned at that meeting with even the board of directors of the USTA. I don't know the answer to that, and if that happened, I hope it would have happened. I'm disappointed in the directors of the USTA for not sharing that information with the membership. It's crazy to think that such an important event would take place. There'd be no run-up to it. There'd be no explanation of it after the fact. There'd be no debriefing, no chance to have membership ask questions or suggest questions for the USTA to ask of the HISA. That's just, to me, poor management, but it's consistent with the way that the USTA has operated as we've gone through this process. There's been very little transparency among the executives there, and certainly very little cooperation with those of us who are members who disagree with the tactics that are being employed.
Yep. And regarding the USTA's lawsuit against HISA, explain how this law could be considered unconstitutional when at the time of the Constitution's printing, sanctioned racing did not exist.
Well, listen, the USTA and the other folks who are challenging this federal legislation are challenging it on the basis of overreach, that the federal government has no legal or constitutional authority to worm its way into an industry that is being run at the state level, that the regulation of horse racing should remain at the state level, that you violate state interests when you try to do what the federal government is trying to do here with this federal horse racing legislation. I don't think it's the worst argument I've ever seen or heard in 25 years of being a legal analyst, but it's definitely not the best. and I think it's likely to fail, at least at the initial stage. What the USTA and the challengers to the law are trying to do is to stop its enforcement before it really gets going, to have a judge issue what would be a nationwide injunction that basically precludes the law from being enforced while the case that the USTA has initiated proceeds to trial. That would take years, that trial. And so this initial decision by this judge is going to obviously have a huge impact on what happens. If the USTA wins an injunction, then everything stops unless that decision is overturned by the Federal Appeals Court and the U.S. Supreme Court, and even that process would take a while. So the folks who are challenging the law, they're taking a shot. They're hoping that they get a judge who sees the Constitution the way they do, but I think it's a long shot.
I agree. And now my last question to you. What are your thoughts on the fact that Chris Oakes has pleaded guilty under oath that he raced horses at Yonkers Raceway that he had treated with performance-enhancing drugs?
Well, listen, I think that everyone who follows this closely believes that the indictments that we saw, 18 months ago, just as the pandemic was starting, are a tip of the iceberg. That the folks who were accused of crimes are not the only people within harness racing who could be accused of similar crimes, that the investigation is still underway, and the hope is, at least my hope is, that some of these people who have pleaded guilty are cooperating with federal officials to try to identify and get the other people who are still operating who have avoided responsibility or accountability to this point. I think we all agree that they exist. I think some of us could even try to identify some of those people. And you'd like to think that guilty pleas in existing litigation generate information for federal authorities that leads them to different clues and so forth, to expand the net. Whether that happens or not is still an open question. I've been expecting something else to happen for many months now, and it hasn't. So I just don't know. But I think that these guilty pleas ratify what the feds have done. They should encourage people that federal investigators are able to catch some of the bad guys in the sport. And when they do, the cases are strong enough that they generate guilty pleas. I agree, and I do see more arrests and indictments coming. I see that coming very soon. Yeah, everyone says that, and yet it hasn't happened. So I guess I'll believe it when I see it. But I do think there's more work to be done, and it'll be interesting to see if that work gets done before or after we see a ruling in this challenge to the new law. Correct. Hey, Trey, do you have anything you wanted to add in here?
No, I just thought Andy's talk was excellent, and I'm sure Bob feels the same way, too. Great, Andy.
Totally agree.
Thank you, guys.
If you're buying or selling your home, Joe Rico is your go-to guy. Joe has been representing buyers and sellers on Long Island for 30 years. He is an expert in all types of sales. Don't settle for average. Call or text Joe Rico today at 516-524-4870. That's Joe Rico at 516-524-4870.
Give everybody Joe's email address.
That's Joe Rico, C21@yahoo.com. Charlie May, after winning the 2021 Meadowlands Pace, the pacing sensation was unjustly disqualified and placed last. Charlie May seeks his redemption in the upcoming Breeders' Crown with eliminations on October 23rd and the final on October 30th. Charlie May is out for revenge. Andy, as always, it is great having you on our show, and you have an open invitation to come back anytime that you like.
Excellent. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. That's a wrap for this week's broadcast of the Harness Racing Alumni Show. On behalf of Trade, Bob, and myself, thanks for listening, and don't forget, tune in next week.
The Harness Racing Alumni Show